Libby stood out as the most unusual inmate I had ever encountered. While the others sat idle, resigned to their fate, she pushed her body to its limits every single day. When the rest indulged in downtime, she continued to train relentlessly. Even during her work hours, she seized every chance to strengthen her arm muscles. Rain or shine, she was out there, running endless laps around the prison yard. But Libby wasn't preparing for an escape. Her intense dedication stemmed from something far more chilling. She was crafting a meticulous plan for revenge. Once, Libby had been a devoted young mother, deeply in love with her husband and child, and sharing an unbreakable bond with a childhood friend. Her life had once seemed picture perfect, but fate had other plans. One night, during a sailing trip, Libby awoke to find herself drenched in blood. Her husband had vanished without a trace. The police, acting swiftly, searched the boat. Her husband had taken out a sizable life insurance policy, naming Libby as the sole beneficiary. That became the key evidence. With the help of her husband's own lawyer, she was convicted of murdering him for the payout. And so, she was wrongly imprisoned, leaving her young son in the care of her lifelong friend. What she didn't know then was that both her best friend and her husband had orchestrated everything. The pair had changed their identities and disappeared. By sheer chance, during a phone call, Libby discovered the truth: her husband was still alive. The betrayal shattered her. The two conspirators believed she would rot behind bars forever. But Libby wasn't the kind to surrender to fate. With unwavering determination, she trained harder than ever. 6 years later, her outstanding behavior earned her a pardon, and she was released on probation. Before leaving, an inmate, once a lawyer, shared a crucial piece of information. Since she had already been convicted of her husband's murder, legally, she couldn't be tried for it again. That moment changed everything for Libby. A new fire was lit within her. After being released, Libby wasted no time in starting her search for any trace of her husband and former best friend. Although the pair had vanished without a trace, they had left behind digital footprints. Her old friend Green had once worked as an online educator, which meant there had to be records somewhere. But when Libby began looking, she was overwhelmed. Over 1,000 teachers shared the same name. Tracking them one by one could take a lifetime, and time wasn't on Libby's side. Determined, she broke curfew that very night and slipped away from her house arrest. Her destination, the school where Green had once taught. She broke into the building and rummaged through files until she finally located Green's personnel record. But before she could make a clean escape, the police showed up, forcing her to flee in a panic. Drawing on the agility and endurance she had built in prison, Libby vaulted over a metal fence with ease, leaving an out-of-shape officer struggling to keep up. Despite her speed, she was ultimately outnumbered and caught after a relentless chase. Libby kept insisting she was innocent, that her husband was still alive, but the authorities dismissed her claims as delusions. She couldn't accept going back behind bars without delivering justice. The next day, during the transport back to prison, Libby continued to plead her case. Her constant talking irritated the officer in charge, who decided to make a stop. He handcuffed her to the door of the patrol car and went inside a nearby cafe for coffee, forgetting that the keys were still in the ignition. Seizing her chance, Libby spotted a water pipe behind her. She knew she had a shot at escape. She started the car and hit the gas, dragging the handcuffs against the pipe in hopes of snapping them. The first attempt failed. She tried again, but before she could break free, the officer noticed and rushed back. In that split-second decision, Libby spun the wheel and drove the car straight into the sea, plunging them both underwater. As the vehicle sank, the officer had no choice but to unlock the handcuffs. Libby took advantage of the moment. She grabbed his gun and bolted. Though he swam after her, she managed to knock him out cold. Moments later, the officer was rescued by a nearby ferry crew, while Libby, powered by her exceptional stamina, swam all the way to shore. Without wasting a second, she flagged down a car and made her way straight to her mother's house. When Libby showed up at her mother's doorstep, having broken out of custody, her mother said nothing. She simply handed her daughter a large sum of money, savings she had quietly set aside over the years. With that, Libby continued on her mission for justice. Her first goal was to track down the whereabouts of her former husband and the friend who had betrayed her. She devised a clever plan. Visiting a car dealership, she posed as a customer looking to finance a vehicle. Then, she gave the salesperson her former friend Green's social security number. Using that information, the employee pulled up records, which led Libby straight to a valuable lead and address linked to both her ex-husband and Green. Wasting no time, Libby went to the location, convinced she was finally closing in on her revenge. But when she arrived, the landlord delivered shocking news: Green had died in a fire. Libby was stunned. She couldn't believe it. Could it be that her husband had silenced Green too? She began combing through archived news reports about the fire, hoping to uncover anything that might explain what really happened. At last, in an old newspaper, Libby spotted a clue. An article mentioned a painting hidden behind a wall that had survived the fire. She was certain her ex-husband had purchased it. Believing the art gallery would have more details, she contacted the dealer. Luckily, her instincts were right, they gave her the address of the buyer. But what she didn't realize was that the police chief was already closing in. Just moments after she left the gallery, the police raided the place. As the officer pursued her, Libby took a desperate risk. She jumped into a car and sped away. She wasn't just running, she was chasing the truth. Following the address she had obtained, she arrived at her ex-husband's residence only to discover it was an embassy, a high-security facility. Not exactly an easy place to confront someone. That night, dressed in an elegant gown, Libby infiltrated a formal event hosted by her ex-husband. He was living a life of luxury, surrounded by wealth and status, all built on betrayal. When he saw her, his face went pale. He never expected the woman he thought was safely locked away to appear before him. Panic-stricken, he begged her to stay quiet and quickly shifted the blame, claiming Green had seduced him into everything. But Libby had seen through his lies long ago. She accused him directly, insisting Green's death wasn't an accident, especially since he had received a hefty insurance payout because of it. Libby demanded he return their son to her, warning that if he didn't, she would expose the entire truth. Before he could respond, the police chief arrived once again. Libby had no choice but to escape. The officer showed her photo to the ex-husband as a warning. Seizing the opportunity, the ex pressured the police to hunt her down immediately. Later, while Libby was walking through the city, officers surrounded her. Just when it seemed there was no way out, a bolt of lightning struck nearby, causing chaos. In the confusion, she slipped away once again. The next day, Libby called her ex-husband and told him to meet her at a public cemetery, bringing their son with him. She chose the cemetery because funerals were common there, and the presence of crowds meant he'd be less likely to try anything underhanded. Soon enough, the long-awaited reunion took place. After 6 painful years apart, Libby finally saw her son again. The boy stood some distance away, but as Libby stepped closer, he suddenly turned and ran. Without hesitation, she chased after him, unaware that she had just walked into her ex-husband's trap. The child wasn't her son at all, but an imposter hired to deceive her. Her ex emerged from the shadows, ambushed her, and without remorse, sealed her inside a coffin, intending to suffocate her to death. When Libby regained consciousness, she realized she was trapped in the tight confines of a coffin. Panic set in as she noticed, by the faint flicker of light, a corpse lying beside her. She screamed for help, but no one came. Just when despair was about to take over, she remembered. The handgun she always carried was still tucked into her waistband. Thinking fast, she used it to shoot the coffin's latch and miraculously freed herself. Bruised but alive, she broke out. Meanwhile, the police investigation was gaining momentum. Officers were beginning to believe that Libby might truly be innocent. Disheveled and shaken, Libby wandered down the street until she was found. Overwhelmed by emotion, she broke down in tears. No one could imagine the horror she had just endured. That evening, the police visited her ex-husband. Confident and composed, he confessed that he had faked his death to frame his wife. Cold-blooded and arrogant, he even offered the police chief $100 million to stay silent. Pretending to accept the bribe, the officer asked how he planned to cleanly deal with Libby. Smirking, the man replied with chilling ease, she was already dead. But at that very moment, Libby walked through the door. His smug expression vanished. Holding him at gunpoint, Libby forced him to reveal the whereabouts of their son. Once she had the address, she fired a warning shot, not to kill him, but to keep him in place. Unknown to him, she had called the police beforehand. Their entire conversation had been recorded. Once, he had framed her as a killer. Now, she would expose him for the attempted murderer he truly was, using his own tactics against him. Libby thought her long journey for justice was finally over. But then, unexpectedly, he pulled a concealed gun. Just as he fired, the police chief threw himself into the line of fire to protect Libby. In the chaos that followed, the ex-husband fired wildly, determined to eliminate everyone. As he prepared for a final shot, Libby acted fast and shot him first. The blast rang out, and with it, the man who had destroyed her life was finally finished. Libby was officially cleared of all charges. Because her actions were in self-defense and saved a police officer's life, she was not sent back to prison. With her name cleared and justice served, Libby rushed to be reunited with her son. What had kept her going all this time wasn't hatred, it was love. She went to the school where her son was studying. Despite the 6 years that had passed, she recognized him instantly. At first, the boy was uncertain, but as he looked closer, his expression shifted. He knew it was his mother. They embraced, holding each other tightly, finally reunited. Through incredible resilience and determination, Libby had reclaimed both her freedom and her dignity. Maybe justice truly does prevail in the end.